Mr. Chairman, I apologize. Ms. Wheat has corrected me, thankfully. With respect to Dr. Petrunic's direct testimony, I was referring to that as his direct testimony. He actually submitted amended direct testimony on September 24th. So what I'm intending to refer to is that amended direct testimony, not the original that was filed.
So what we need to do? Ms. Wheat said I can just say that's okay.
Thank you. And I have a similar...
That's a good plan. That's so ordered.
Excellent. I have a similar issue with some testimony from Kyle Young. He submitted revised direct testimony on August 31st, so we wanted to refer to that revised.
Okay, we will refer to it in that manner.
Final two points very quickly. I noted that we were tendering Dr. Petrunik as an expert. I would like that just to be presented to the chairman. We believe Mr. Petrunik is qualified as an expert and can provide expert opinion testimony in this case.
Yeah, I think I said granted in there. I might have fudged it in there in between things, so granted.
And then one final point, and I will sit down. Mr. Rooks was able to prepare the late filed exhibit that the commissioners requested, and I believe we have indicated that it will be exhibit number 134. You have a copy of it in front of you. So Mr. Rooks is available for questioning from the commissioners to the extent they have any questions on this topic. I will note that Mr. Rooks is hoping to leave for the Thanksgiving holiday tomorrow afternoon. So if it turns out that the commissioners do have some questions, we would appreciate it if those questions could be lobbed by in the morning.
Okay, we'll work on that.
Mr. Chairman, excuse me, do the parties have a copy of the late file exhibit? I don't.
Yeah,
there's one here. I think it's late file exhibit 133.
Which was incorrectly identified. It should be 134.
Mr. Chairman, ORS would just note that, that we think that it has some unfair and inconsistent comparisons and would need to be either explained or tested in some way, shape, or form, rather than just accepted.
I would agree. I would concur, Mr.
Okay, we'll put Mr. Rooks back up in the morning then, and we'll talk about it.
That's fine. Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go right ahead.
Just a reminder, I noted this before the lunch break for scheduling this afternoon. Mr. Kokums and Mr. Young can be available later this week. Dr. Petrunik has international travel planned, so to the extent that the parties want to focus their cross-examination of Dr. Petrunik, that might be a good use of time.
Okay, we'll do that. Mr. Guile.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's my intention as well, to address Dr.
And make sure that's your own there.
And my questions are for Dr. Petrunik. Good afternoon, gentlemen, and Dr. Petrunik, first and foremost to this afternoon. Bob Guile is my name. I'm here on behalf of Friends of the Earth and Sierra Club. Welcome to South Carolina. Dr. Petrunik, when were you first retained for the consultancy for which you're now testifying?
I think it was in August.
August of this year? After the date of abandonment of the VC Summer Units 2 and 3?
Yes.
All right. And so I take it from that you had no prior involvement in consulting with the owners for construction of the Summer Units 2 and 3, the abandoned project?
No, I did not have any involvement with the owner.
Okay. Had you ever been to South Carolina before?
To my knowledge of the United States, I have visited, not South Carolina, I've been to Georgia, the Vogel plants in Georgia, right?
Yes, sir.
So I've been to Vogel before.
All right. And when did you first go to the summer site, the Units 2 and 3 construction site?
That was, Kyle, you told me around the site. That was in August, I think. August, it wasn't, yeah.
I don't recall the exact date, but it was the fall, I believe, of 2017.
All right. And shortly after you were retained for this consultancy, is that correct, Dr. Petrunik?
That's correct.
All right. Are you being compensated for your work here?
Yes, I am.
And in what form, sir?
U.S. dollars, they're better than
That's it. Good, good. Or Canadian dollars, as the case may be.
No, they're not so good.
Not so good. Oh, dear.
No.
Well, I'll keep that in mind. And at what rate, sir?
I'm being paid $400 U.S. an hour when I'm at home in Canada, and $5.25 when I come here because I told Scanna that I really don't like to travel and I'd rather work quietly at home. I don't want hours, okay?
All right. And can you give us an estimate of how many hours you've logged to date on this?
So far I've billed and paid for $20,000, including expenses, and I haven't submitted the final billing yet.
And how much have you not submitted a billing for approximately?
But say it might be another 25 in that area, 25, 30.
All right. And have you had any assistance from anyone on behalf of the company in drafting the testimony that you've offered here?
The testimony is mine. We had verbal interchanges, and they took my engineering English and make it more presentable. Okay, but basically all the thoughts are mine, and the thoughts are mine.
All right. You submitted drafts of your testimony for review and comment by representatives of the company?
I submitted some initial information in my words, and they made it, I would say, suitable and informed to present to the commission.
All right. So if I understand from your direct testimony that you had a long career, I count about 35 years, with AECL. Is that correct?
That is correct, sir.
Right. And that is the Atomic Energy Commission of Canada Limited. Is that correct?
Atomic Energy of Canada Limited.
Atomic Energy of Canada Limited. We don't need a commission.
Crown Corporation.
Okay, and I did see that, a Crown Corporation. You are a member of the Dominion of the Commonwealth of Great Britain and other countries formerly, and the Crown, I take it, is currently the Queen of England. Is that correct?
Let's not get into my politics.
But suffice it to say that AECL, a Crown company, is owned by the government of Canada?
That is correct.
You left AECL in 2009, if I read your testimony correctly.
January 20th, 2009.
All right, sir. And what became of AECL, the Crown company?
The Crown company eventually was bought by SNC Lavalin and merged later with SNC Nuclear.
Right. And it was sold by the Canadian government in 2012. Is that a correct understanding?
That's probably right, yeah.
All right. Would you agree with the following, that Canada's Conservative government decided that the Crown company was bleeding too much money and sold the power generation portion to SNC Lavalin Group Incorporated for $15 million in June of 2012. Does that sound about right?
No, it doesn't. AECL was a Crown corporation. There were two aspects of the business. One was commercial new builds and services, and the other one was a legacy of Chalk River site and research reactors. The Chalk River site produced a lot of plutonium for the United States, and there were major costs in the cleanup of that particular facility. And so the government was funding the cleanup cost. If you look at the commercial part of the business, we were making money, but it was the total liability effectively, and the government just wanted to reduce that liability. And
I kind of your mellifluous accent lost me a little bit there, but you mentioned the Chalk River site. Is that correct?
That Chalk River site, White Shell site, they're owned by Atomic Energy of Canada, and they're in northern Canada.
Right. Now, for most of that time and beginning, I think, if I got my history right, at the Chalk River site, you and your company evolved a reactor design called the CANDU reactor. Is that correct?
The CANDU reactor was evolved 45, 50 years ago. That's right.
All right. And CANDU, great name. I like that positive spirit. Great day in South Carolina. CANDU, Canada. CANDU is an acronym, or I guess maybe that's not the term of art, but anyway, it stands for Canadian Deuterium Uranium Reactor. That's the nomenclature that's referred to.
That is correct.
Right? And a deuterium uranium reactor is not a light water or pressurized water reactor, as are the case for Summer Unit 1 or the AP1000 design. Isn't that correct?
That is correct.
All right. Moment, Mr. Chairman. And how many CANDU reactors are there? How many nuclear reactors are there in Canada?
There are 16 operating in the province I live, and there's one operating in the province of New Brunswick, or commercial power reactors.
And how many of those are CANDU or CANDU derivative reactors?
All of them are CANDU.
All of them, all right. And are there any AP1000 reactors, Westinghouse reactors operating in Canada?
They bid on a AP1000 reactor about 11, 12 years ago, but it wasn't successful.
All right. And are there any new nuclear build projects now still underway in Canada?
Ontario, where the province where I grew up and live, is, I said, has 16 nuclear reactors. It's the largest province. Unfortunately, we've suffered a situation where there's been no growth in electricity for the past 10 to 15 years, and demand for power is down.
And so the answer to my question is no?
No, that's correct. Sorry.
Now, it is true that part of the CANDU design that you were involved in your career with AECL was exporting the design to other countries, including India, correct?
That is correct.
All right. But the government of Canada and your company stopped exporting technology to India, nuclear technology to India, because it's believed that the Indians used the CANDU technology to produce first an atomic weapon and then a hydrogen bomb. There were proliferation concerns about the use of the CANDU technology that ended its promotion as a technology by your company in Canada. In India, isn't that correct?
I would like to clarify your comment a little bit. The reactor that had been sold to India was a research reactor, and so it used heavy water. I think you heard the word CANDU, natural deuterium uranium, and the Indians were taking that fuel out of the reactor, reprocessing it, and converting it to plutonium, at which point Canada decided that it would cease relations with India and not support India in its nuclear program.
Yes, sir. And in addition, that same research reactor, based on the CANDU clone or CANDU model, also became the source of tritium that was used in thermonuclear weapons in the first Indian hydrogen bomb.
I'm not knowledgeable of that. Of that's what you're talking about.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
I don't know that. Okay.
But in any event, whether because of both the use in an atomic weapon and also potentially the use in a thermonuclear weapon, your company in Canada stopped selling the technology to the Indians. Isn't that correct?
That is correct.
One more point. I want to show you a New York Times article from December 3, 1997, regarding the reactor technology that you worked on, Dr. Petrunik. And the article is entitled Canadians Export a Type of Reactor They Closed Down. I want to direct your attention
Yep.
Yes, and I apologize for my interlineation. It's my hand scratching, but the text there reads as follows: although they are simpler than American type reactors to build, experts now agree that they are far more complex to keep running. Maintaining the units has put enormous demands on the Canadian operators with solid technical backgrounds and access to the latest equipment and designs. Do you agree with that statement?
No, I don't. Let me start with your first comment about simpler than American reactors. If you read can I politely use the word propaganda used by my other companies like Areva and Westinghouse? They said that CANDU reactors with all their plumbing involved were much more complicated to build than light water reactors. So that's really not what the market is saying. Number two, the CANDU reactors that were built by my company and led by myself in China are always in the top 5 in China in terms of lifetime capacity factor and performance. They're operating very, very well. The CANDU reactor in Argentina, which I was the project director on, operated extremely well on about, my estimate is half the cost of what it would take to operate a reactor in Canada. It operated extremely successfully. Unit number 1 and 2 in Cernavoda, Romania are operating very well. So the CANDU reactor technology is operated very well. Korea, Wolfson 1, 2, 3, and 4 have usually been in the top of the Korean reactors in terms of capacity factors. So they operate very well, highly successful, great capacity factors. In Ontario, Canada, the operating capacity factors fell down for a while. I think Canada learned from the U.S. experience, where the U.S. fleet was operating at about 70% and instituted improvements in operations. And so Bruce Power, which is a private utility in Canada, increased its capacity factors to the 90% range, which is really good. And OPG, I think, followed that afterwards. So there were some difficulties in Canada, similar to what happened in the United States.
All right, thank you. Same New York Times article. Says this: since 1952, according to the estimate, Canada's nuclear industry has received more than $10 billion in government subsidies. It sold 11 reactors overseas, including the 2 to China. Is that true?
I ran the commercial business. We made money on our reactor sales.
But is that true that the government of Canada subsidized your company to that degree?
Please remember what I said earlier, that we had a facility at Chalk River, which was a legacy site for waste. It was also a technology center for doing studies for radioisotopes, for radiation chemistry, for neutron beam source for scientific research. So Chalk River was an R&D scientific center. It also had carried the legacy waste problem with it. So the money was basically flowing to the Chalk River and the White Shell facilities, which operated research reactors and isotope production for molybdenum-99, which is used in the treatment of medical detection in the body.
Yes, that's helpful to understand, but is it true that the Canadian government subsidized your company to the tune of $10 billion?
One, I don't know the number, and I know the Canadian government definitely supported the Chalk River site and the White Shell sites in the ways I discussed it. I don't know what the number is.
All right. So we've talked about the Canadian operations, and again, you were a crown company owned by the Canadian government. In South Korea, who owned the reactors that CANDU variant reactors there?
Korea Electric Power Company.
Is that an arm of the government of Korea?
It is an arm of the government, yes,
right.
Government utility.
All right. There are 2 in China. You were pointed out in your summary or your testimony. And who in Canada owns the CANDU variant or CANDU reactors that are in operation in China?
So who in China, you mean?
Yes, who in China?
Okay. The CANDU reactors in China are owned by a company that it's not a government company. It's owned by, I think, a third Qinshan Nuclear Power Company, and that's rolled up now into the Qinshan Nuclear Power Company, which contains investors from various parts of China, local government, a number of investors. I don't know the breakdown.
And does the Chinese government have an interest in those reactors?
The Chinese government was, TQNPC was initially a mixed company with the Chinese government, so their interest would be in securing the sale and supporting the sale in the beginning.
And did the Chinese government have responsibility for building those reactors?
The third Qinshan Nuclear Power Company had responsibility for it. And as I said, the ownership was a mixed company consisting of CNNC, Zhejiang government, and there was a couple of other investors, Chinese investors in it.
All right. We talked about India a bit, no longer do business with them. Did the Indian government have an interest in the CANDU variant reactors that were built there?
They continued to, after Canada broke relations off with India, they continued to work on their own, and they continued to develop the technology using their own engineers, their own R&D, their own research, without support from Canada.
All right. Argentina, government ownership of the CANDU reactor?
Embalse is owned by NASA, which would be a government owner, yes.
Right. Romania?
Romania, Cernavodă would be, I don't know what the ownership of the utility is today.
Mm-hmm. And Pakistan?
Pakistan, there was a research reactor there. I have no idea what's there now, anything in there.
So in the United States, Dr. Petrunik, we have rate regulation, private investor-owned utility, in this case, building the reactor.
Yep.
That's not the case in any of the CANDU reactors with which you're experienced in your long career with AEC.
I think in most cases, the reactors have been sold to utilities or entities that are financially backed by government.
All right.
As in Canada, all the utilities are basically owned by either federal government or provincial government. That's the model in Canada.
All right. So in most of your testimony, you talk about the capacity of being able to complete the project,
right?
The expectation that the project can be completed. But that's not the only question when it goes to the prudence decision that's before this commission. The other key element is completed at what cost? You recognize that, don't you?
Yes, you understand what's the final price.
What's the final price?
Yep.
And in all of your experience, that final price has been either subsidized by the government or absorbed by the government in some other fashion. I mean, the Chinese, do you know what the price that China actually pays for these reactors?
Yes, the contract was EPC, fixed price, for engineering, construction, and equipment. The only part that I led the negotiations, so I was unable to price the cost of construction labor. So I reached an agreement with the owner to say, listen, I'll take schedule and quality responsibility, that they're built on time and the quality is maintained, but you pay for the labor cost.
And they did.
And they did. And the cost of power was about 4 cents US a kilowatt hour.
That's what the Chinese tell you. Is that right?
I know the owner very well, and we had discussions over what the costs were. And I also know what my EPC cost is. I also know how many Chinese workers worked on the site. So on the site, we had about 5,000 workers at peak for 2 units. And the cost of Chinese labor is fairly low. So if I do the mathematics, the number of 4 cents is right, because a large part of the cost was fixed price.
I mean, Mr. Petrunik, we've talked endlessly about the Chinese comparison, and what we know is that there's just not transparency. I mean, it's a communist government. There's no NRC. There's no rate regulation in China. The Chinese can absorb whatever cost they choose as a government to produce a product.
I respectfully disagree with you. You mentioned the comment about the regulator. The regulator gave us a hard time. He asked more than 2,000 questions. They have a lot of PhDs. They're very bright. And the questions were trying to ensure that they understood the technology and that they were able to regulate it successfully. I was very impressed with the Chinese regulator. They did a good job.
All right. Well, here it's the ratepayers. There's no government subsidy.
I'm sorry. I also made my point clear. The contract, most of it was EPC, fixed price. There was no subsidy because we know what the costs are.
I'm talking about now, here. In this case, for the VC Summer Units 2 and 3,
yes,
the cost will be borne if your employer, your principal who's hired you, if they get their way, it'll be borne by my clients, by the ratepayers of South Carolina. Well, isn't that true?
Okay, look, I'm providing advice on project management and how the owner managed the project. You're getting into an area of how you structurally finance and build the models in the United States, which, yes, is often, I believe, what you call ratepayer-based. That's not my area of expertise. Okay?
Right. You didn't evaluate the economic prudence of completing this project, did you?
I did not.
Mm-hmm. And would you opine that if this project were completed at what's been estimated at the cost for the two comparable units at Vogel, $30 billion, that would be a prudent decision to impose those costs and a return on those costs on South Carolina ratepayers? Would that be prudent?
Mr. Chairman, I'd object. That's hypothetical. We're obviously not requesting that the commission approve costs that are associated with the Vogel project. So I don't understand how that has any relevance
Chairman,
at all.
The point really here is, and I'll be quick to conclude, the point really is that this witness says repeatedly that the project could be finished, should be finished, would have been finished. I mean, there are repeated assurances in isolation that we could get this job done, but for something. And he has a series of somethings in his testimony. Question is, at what cost? And I think it's a fair question to ask. And if he doesn't know or he didn't evaluate or has no opinion, that's fine by me.
Okay, we're going to overrule this, and you can answer it if you know the answer.
I'll repeat. Would it be prudent, Dr. Petrunik, to have completed this project if it cost in excess of $30 billion?
One $30 billion number I don't know about. My review was limited to a point where I looked at the 2015 amendment and the risk transfer. The 2015 amendment was a commercial negotiation between WEC and SC, E&G, and Santee Cooper. I got to get it right. There's too many names for me. And that was really an important agreement because what it did is that the major cost to complete the project, a large part of it was already fixed price, which is a really good decision because you want to limit your risk and cost. So when WEC agreed to accept a later date and increase money, they took fixed price risk. So now we know that the largest part of the cost going forward would be bounded. And so at that time, I looked at the data, and I think it was a good decision as an owner, because I worked as an owner and I worked as a vendor, and I saw both sides, and I said, this is good. I did not anticipate WEC going under. I mean, I worked with WEC staff. I talked to them. They were passionate. They were committed. They understood the problems at the site. So in 2015 and 16, I said, you guys have challenges, but what I heard, I believed they would be finished, and they were willing to accept that risk. So I thought WEC would finish the project. I didn't know Toshiba wouldn't be able to support them due to their financial difficulty because I just followed the traffic. The other aspect, which is also really important here, is that WEC is making business decisions, okay? When it says, here's the money, we'll cap the price, and so why does WEC do this? I know Jeff Benjamin, okay, and I know WEC. So they look on some things like, well, put 2 units in service and 4, say Vogel and Summer, okay, both of them. WEC made a lot of money on fuel and services, a lot of money, because I know what they charge other people. It's really expensive. They make a ton of money. Number 2, because of the technology, because it's passive, because it's better technically, like an engineering technical reactor, WEC had really great interest abroad. Czechoslovakia, Romania, Vietnam, India. I was part of the red team to review India. It would have been a great contract for them because they would have taken low risk and an EP basis, which means everything they learned from China and the United States. Here's the pack of paper. I don't do a lot of work with it. I charge money and I make a really good profit margin. So WEC saw that down the tube. So you had services, a lot of money coming in. And then I was also involved on more sides, trying to help NewGen, because I know the CEO of NewGen at the time, and WEC, say, how are you guys going to set up your model? What are you talking about? What risks are you going to take? We didn't get finished, but I started to engage with them on that subject. So I saw that the AP1000 had challenges. It was really difficult to finish. But, from a high-level business perspective, there was money coming down the system. So, and it was capped. The contract that the owner, I'll call it, the other words I can't say it too long, The contract that the owner negotiated here in 2015 was exactly what I would have done, exactly. And on the vendor side, I didn't say much about this earlier. I love EPC contracts. Do you know why? Because I can build the
Let me just
project.
interrupt you a second. I really appreciate the primer, but trying to control the evidence a little bit. We're running some time here. Others have questions for you. Suffice it to say that putting that fixed price burden on Westinghouse just didn't work out. I mean, they went bankrupt, and we're left holding the bag. That is the result. You can't dispute that.
That happened. Okay.
It did happen.
It happened. Yes.
That's all I have for you, Dr. Petrunik. I commend you for visiting South Carolina. Visit Charleston, Myrtle Beach, go up to the mountains, stay around a little while, as long as you're off the clock, okay? Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Mr. Butler, Jim Cox again from the White Law Firm in Greenville, appearing on behalf of the Office of Regulatory Staff. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Mr. Kokums, we'll have to wait for your spreadsheets for another day or two, I think. Dr. Petrunik, I'll just have some questions for you in the brief time that we have left here. The last paragraph of your summary that you read regarding legislation in South Carolina, that wasn't in your pre-filed testimony, was it?
Right.
Mr. Chairman, at this point, the ORS would request that that last paragraph of Dr. Petrunik's summary be stricken from the record because it wasn't pre-filed.
That's incorrect, Mr. Chairman. The rebuttal testimony contained commentary along those lines, and Dr. Petrunik was summarizing what was contained in the pre-filed rebuttal testimony.
Okay.
We're going to overrule that.
Dr. Petrunik, there was no CV attached to your pre-filed testimony. Is that correct?
No C?
No CV or resume?
Oh, no, there was none.
Do you have a CV?
I could make one available. But
Well, I just wanted to get a better idea of your background. Based on your summary, is it correct, Dr. Petrunik, that you've never worked on construction of any American nuclear reactor?
I have not worked on the construction of American nuclear reactors.
In your international work on the AP1000 reactor, you weren't actually yourself involved in the construction of those reactors, correct?
No, I was not. I was providing project management support to the AP1000, Westinghouse in this case.
And Dr. Petrunik, part of the support that you provide, you've been retained before to be in an owner's oversight role. Is that correct?
I was in Abu Dhabi, where I worked for the UAE government. I was in charge of all the oversight of the reactors.
So that's a situation, Dr. Petrunik, where the owner brought you in as a third party to oversee construction of the reactor. Is that correct?
I worked for the owner directly as an employee.
As an employee,
The
okay.
Abu Dhabi government, yeah.
And the owner brought you in to do that role, is that
That's correct.
Dr. Petrunik, have you read the deposition of Ty Troutman, the Bechtel president who oversaw the Bechtel assessment of VC Summer?
Yes, I did.
And so you understand that the assumptions in your testimony about what Bechtel did and what it was asked to do are wrong, correct?
Bechtel was asked to do an assessment. I understand from reading the testimony and other reports that they were not asked to provide a date for substantial completion.
Okay, we'll take a closer look at that. Did you read the deposition of Terry Elam, the consortium and Westinghouse lead scheduler?
Don't think so.
Is Mr. Troutman's deposition the only one that you read?
That's the one I remember looking at, yes.
You didn't watch or read the testimony here before the commission of Gary Jones or the lawyer George Winnick, did you?
I saw a little bit of it, not very much.
Which one
I
of those?
saw an hour of it, that was it.
Which witness did you see a little
I
of?
saw Gary Jones. I think I saw about an hour, and I saw about 2 or 3 hours of George Winnick's testimony.
On the live stream?
I saw it after because I was doing other things, and I caught a bit of it during the evening.
Okay. You mentioned, Dr. Petrunik, your opinion that the Bechtel schedule assessment was unauthorized. Do you know who Stephen Byrne is?
Stephen Byrne? He's
Yes.
senior executive of Scanna.
Did you ever meet him?
No, I did not.
And you've never spoken to him, I take it?
No.
Did you know that he was SC&G's primary contact for Bechtel and Ty Troutman for the Bechtel assessment?
I read some correspondence which indicated that, and that's how I know from reading that.
Did you know that Mr. Byrne had recognized the need for a third-party schedule assessment as far back as October 2014?
Mr. Chairman, I'll object. That lacks foundation. There's no document or anything in the record that establishes that particular point. And at this point, he appears to be asking Dr. Petrunik what he understands from the record, which I'm not sure is appropriate under the circumstance.
Overruled. If he knows, he can answer. If he doesn't, he doesn't say so.
Repeat the question, please.
Yes, Dr. Petrunik. Did you know that Mr. Byrne recognized the need for a third-party schedule assessment of VC Summer as far back as October 2014?
I can't specifically point to that. Okay.
There's an email on the screen we have here from Stephen Byrne to Kevin Marsh, Jimmy Addison, Michael Archie, among others. And the email says, quote, "We have previously discussed getting a third-party look at our schedule and on-site efficiencies at VC Summer construction project. We are trying to find someone with mega project experience." You weren't familiar with that email, were you, Dr. Petrunik? Okay. Dr. Petrunik, you know that the boards of both owners approved the Bechtel assessment and the number of Bechtel employees and the cost of the assessment before the lawyer Winnick was ever involved, don't you?
I know the cost, and I don't know what the approval process was. I know Bechtel were hired, and I don't know exactly what the process was.
Do you know that Bechtel and SC&G agreed to the scope of the Bechtel assessment before the lawyer Winnick was ever involved?
I saw the scope documents that were drafted. I don't have knowledge of what you're talking about.
Well, let's look at what Mr. Troutman said about this. This is testimony from Mr. Troutman. See if I can blow it up here. I'll read from it. It's page 24, line 16. When was an attorney first get involved with the discussions about the assessment? Objection from counsel. The witness. It was after the development of the scope document, which was primarily done back and forth between me and my team and Steve Byrne and the SCANA team that was on the ground at the project, was sometime between the point that we developed the scope document and the actual, contract being put in place. Do you recall that from Mr. Troutman's deposition?
I read the deposition, but I can't recall the exact words. If that's what it says, that's what's there, okay?
Yeah. Dr. Petrunik, you know that Mr. Winnick being involved didn't change the scope of the assessment done by Bechtel at all, did it?
I only know what the scope that was contracted for was. I don't know what the change is.
Let's look at what that scope is. Let's go to the Bechtel project assessment report. We'll go to page 1 of that document. So I'm reading from page 1 of the Bechtel project assessment report. The objective of the assessment was to assist SCH and the owners South Carolina Electric and Gas Company, SC&G, and South Carolina Public Services Authority, SCPSA, to better understand the current status and potential challenges of the project to help ensure the project is on the most cost-efficient trajectory to completion. Did I read that correctly?
That's what it says, yep.
And isn't it true, Dr. Petrunik, that the schedule to complete the project affects the cost of the project too, doesn't it?
Put the word back up there again for me, please.
Well, this really isn't about those words there. I'm asking you a question that, isn't it true that the schedule to complete a project, how much time is left before completion, that affects what the estimated cost to complete the project will be?
In a project, the time it takes to complete would affect the cost.
Okay. You need to know the schedule to really know what the cost to complete the project will be,
It
correct?
also depends how much is fixed price. And if it's fixed price, then your cost essentially is mitigated by the fact that EPC is fixed price.
But there's sometimes owner's cost outside of the EPC.
There are always owner's cost. It's a question of timing, but you can have owner's cost to staff and train and get ready for utility. And I can just say that one of the large projects I worked on, the critical path was not the completion of the project, but it wasn't the owners getting ready fast enough for being able to operate the unit. So yes, there are owner's costs, but they have to be spent, and they should be spent in time to be able to start the units up.
Okay. And let's look at the actual contract, Dr. Petrunik, that under which Bechtel was retained.
Do you mind if I walk up? I've got some pretty heavy glasses on so I can see it.
Yeah, I was hoping to...
Mr. Chairman, I'd just suggest that the witness be provided a copy of the document if he's going to be referred to it specifically.
I'm not sure I have a copy up here, Mr. Chairman. This, the PSA...
Thank you very much.
So, Dr. Petrunik, we're on attachment A to the PSA. And if you look at the third paragraph down, the first sentence, can you read that sentence?
Bechtel team will evaluate the current status and forecasted completion plan through the design, supply chain, and construction aspects of the project. They will focus on understanding the issues that have caused impact to date, assessing the effectiveness of the mitigation plan.
And that's fine,
to address
Dr.
those issues.
The first sentence was all I...
Current status and forecast completion plan.
And Dr. Petrunik, isn't it correct that this assessment says that Bechtel was retained to evaluate the forecasted completion plan of the project?
It says they were hired to assess the completion plan, not the date. In other words, assess how the WEC was proceeding to complete the project. It didn't say they were going to assess the completion date. How are you doing it? What does the plan look like? What are the weaknesses? And that's how I read it.
Okay. Now, you testified, Dr. Petrunik, that the Bechtel assessment contained a number of reasonable and useful suggestions for improving the efficiency of the project, right?
That's correct.
And isn't it true that SC&G knew the assessment had a number of good recommendations because it actually tracked its progress in implementing those recommendations?
What I know is the fact that many of the issues raised by Bechtel were in the monthly report. The issues with CB&I, friction with Westinghouse, the issues with problems with the modules, the issues with labor productivity, the issues with supply chain, just-in-time delivery. So a lot of the issues that came out in Bechtel came out, and they were already known. And I want to make an important comment here. I've worked sometimes as a consultant to review projects, and I have consultants working for me. And consultants, what they really do well is they listen to people. They collect data that's already there. And so in my world, 80% of the information comes from somebody talking to a lot of people, putting it together, putting it together, and then maybe adding some of their own experience on top of that. But so I use consultant very carefully, recognizing this is the process. And so in effect, Bechtel are coming in. The issues are documented. I heard about a lot of them because I'm not even here. I'm living in China or Abu Dhabi. I go to the China side. I talk to the owner. I talk to other people in the industry. I meet with the WEC team. I mentioned earlier that I met with one of the senior managers of WEC at BC Summer, and we talked about these, and they were quite clear, and so they weren't surprises. You know, this stuff is known.
And in fact, SC&G thought they were valuable because they tracked the implementation of the recommendations, correct?
Kyle, can you help me on that? Because I'm not knowledgeable.
I just want to know your knowledge, Dr. Petrunik.
Oh, okay.
If you don't know the answer,
okay.
That's fine.
Yeah.
You don't know whether SC&G tracked the recommendations.
I don't know how they followed it.
Okay. Tell me if you agree with this statement, Dr. Petrunik. Quote, "The schedule is a map of where the project is going. If the map is wrong, then the project results will be negative." End quote.
That makes sense, yes.
It's from your book, isn't it?
Could be. I haven't looked at it for a couple of years.
Well, I looked at it today, and
Okay.
you've got a new purchase
Good.
on Amazon.
I don't make any money on it, by the way, because I was living outside of Canada.
I don't think you do. I paid 99 cents
Okay,
for it.
got the electronic copy, yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, you bought it from the right place. Amazon charges more.
That was where I went. That was where I went. There must be a sale, Dr. Petrunik.
No.
Would you also agree with this statement, Dr. Petrunik? Quote, "Project management is the successful leadership of a project to meet scope, schedule, quality, safety, and cost requirements." End quote.
Sounds wonderful.
Okay. Now, you would agree that SC&G came in and, quote, circled the bullet holes on the project. Would you agree with that statement?
I don't know.
Objection, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Cox referred to SC and E and G
I'm
circling
sorry.
the bullet holes. I'm not sure that's what he's
Sorry, Bechtel came in and circled the bullet holes?
I don't know what that means.
Okay, that's a phrase used by Ron Jones, who was a manager of the project.
Okay.
Would you agree with Bechtel's conclusion that the oversight approach taken by the owners does not allow for real-time, appropriate cost and schedule mitigation?
No, I don't agree with it.
So you just agree with all the recommendations that Bechtel made about the consortium's issues, but not the recommendations about the issues the owners had running the project. Is that fair to say?
I can't use the word all of the issues, but I'll point to your point about the owner's role. You said repeat the words about real-time management. You're using something, please.
The schedule approach, the oversight approach taken by the owners does not allow for real-time appropriate cost and schedule mitigation.
Okay, got that. I go back to the fundamental nature of the EPC contract. In China, I delivered the unit under EPC fixed price. Okay, and so the owner was doing oversight on me. The owner had a small number of people. One of the dominant reasons for success on that project was the partnership and working relationship the owner had with us. We were the vendor. The owner saw what was going on. He had the report, he would ask questions on schedule. But the whole nature of the EPC contract is that the owner doesn't do a schedule. He watches, he gives advice, he points out deficiencies, and so the owner is doing oversight. We as the vendor did all the work, we did all the schedules, we made all the plans, and so that model works because it creates a partnership. When I wrote, heavily involved in the writing of the contract for Abu Dhabi, I played a major role in transferring the same experience into this contract. And so there was a very, very strong component to let KEPCO build the project. You build it, okay? We can't, you do what you want, you build it according to schedule, we don't approve, we accept, we can issue a stop work order if something's really bad, but you're free to build the project. And so what we do as owner, we said, well, what are we worried about? I've got an EPC fixed price. Good. Not so much worried about money. Quality, nuclear. Good quality team, focused on quality. The owner used, in my testimony, I used the word graded approach. So we started out with a team, and so we put more quality people on the job. Then we looked at another aspect, and we said, where's the risk that we as the owner could help? Not taking responsibility. Remember, the Koreans built this. So I call it the owner oversight role. So we said, listen, let's put some people in Korean offices because they write safety documents the Korean way. So they can be delivered. So can we help them write it right the first time? So it's a little form of aggressive oversight, but the Koreans wrote the document. They had responsibility. And so this is what I call the oversight approach, where you let the EPC vendor do its job, and you as the owner provide support. In China, for example, I was EPC fixed price, and so what trouble did I have where I needed oversight? I said, Mr. Owner, I'm having trouble getting enough labor, okay, on the site. Now, we were talking about schedule, and I had trouble because twice a year the labor would go away to harvest and plant the rice. And it wasn't in my schedule, so I was, okay, it was a risk. And so got around, and the owner said, look, we'll work to fix this. So I call oversight being, put your hands over here, speak, correct, point out the problem, but I hired you to build it. I don't have the expertise. I don't have all of this. And I think the EPC model as a vendor, I liked it, and I worked as an owner. And this is wonderful because I understood both sides. They were very happy with the EPC model in the UAE because the owner said, look, I'm not going to create this massive team, project management, planning, scheduling, engineering. No, I'm going to contract that out and pay for it. And if I can get fixed price, fantastic, perfect.
Well, and Dr. Petitioner, what I'm getting at is you did testify that the Bechtel assessment included a number of reasonable and appropriate recommendations.
Yep.
But the recommendations that identified issues with the owner, such as that one, those are the ones you disagree with, correct?
I think Bechtel improperly assessed the nature of the EPC contract and the successes in building to it. You know, Bechtel hasn't had a new build for probably 30 or 40 years, okay? New build from start to finish. And so when you're sitting there, I've done nothing but new build my whole life. I've lived in Romania. I've lived in China. I spent a lot of time in Korea. I lived in Abu Dhabi. I lived in Argentina for 5 years. I understood the project. I was sitting right next to the owner every day. You know who I saw when I walked in the office? The first thing, the owner. Okay? I understand the model. I understand the partnership. I understand the risk sharing. So a company like Bechtel, they're a good company, okay? Bechtel, good relation. They do good business, but you know, they haven't had EPC new build. I lived it. The past 30 years, I've lived EPC.
And Dr. Petrunik, you testified that the Bechtel reports did not provide any material information about issues and challenges that was not disclosed in other documents and well known to those following the project. Is that correct?
Almost all of the issues were well known to the project, yeah.
Would you agree that this chart up here, this Bechtel schedule assessment, that was not information that was known to those following the project, correct?
The Bechtel schedule assessment is a data point produced by Bechtel with limited access to data not having
and I understand
not understanding the results of the amendment of 2015. All of the information was developed in a point where you had CB&I fighting with WEC, low productivity. You had WEC struggling to catch ahead with engineering issues. And so all of a sudden, in 2015, these things are happening in parallel. And so SCENG sat down, and you put all the pieces on the board, okay? I've got schedule. I've got completion date. I've got risk transfer in the form of LDs. I've got fixed price. I've got a change in the agreement with CB&I and Fluor. And then I've got WEC here with all of the project information. And now Fluor coming in, and Fluor actually did the reassessment of the schedule. And then I have Bechtel doing an assessment, generating dates with partial information, not access to all the data, using a lot of generic information that they developed, but they haven't had a new build in 30 or 40 years. They've got generic information. And the other thing that's really important is that you're going to generate a solution, okay? Now, what's important? What's important is, what are the assumptions that go into that? It's like getting a computer program, putting data in, and you get a bunch of stuff out. Well, it's really important to figure out what's the basis of my data going forward. So Bechtel made some assumptions. I saw some of them, and then they didn't really look at what happened to the amendment, and they had to take a lot of their own information and experience. So I'm sitting here as SCENG, and I'm saying, oh, I'm negotiating. I put all these pieces together, and WEC, who has all the data, WEC, who can say, look, we're getting a little bit better because Unit 3 is better than Unit 2. So when I look at how one might do this, I know from personal experience, having built units, that the amount of labor I used in China was 75% of that used in the first unit. So I'm making out a plan to complete. I'm making out a cost. So I can move resources, okay? I can put resources from Unit 3 to 2 if I understand that. I shape my work program. I look at critical path. I look at 24/7. So Bechtel did a simple model. Now, if I'm WEC, I have to put money on the table, okay? Fixed price risk. I like fixed price contract, but fixed price risk is tough. But you got to understand. In order to take it, you have to understand it. So WEC is saying, okay, I'll take the risk. Divest LDs, I'll take fixed price. So WEC had all of the schedule information to do that. They had Fluor coming on board. And looking over the horizon, I'm just looking at, from my experience, I see China. The guy who's running the site in Sanmen worked for me. And I talked to him. I said, hey, what's happening? He said, we're getting out of it. Okay, we've had trouble. We have trouble with the Curtis Wright pumps, which they have to work around and cost them about a year in the schedule. Okay? So I see all that, and I'm saying, they'll break out of it, okay? From what I saw there, so you factor that into whatever date WEC is going to produce. And that's how you do it. You put all that commercial, risk, profit going forward. WEC took pressure on. But you know what? They had to finish this job. They had to be successful because, as I said earlier, their fuel business, their services business, future AP1000 sales depended on it. They were going to finish this. I met the staff. I met the site managers.
Let me ask you this, Dr. Petrunik. So you say WEC indicated they wanted to get it done. Is it wise, if you project that WEC wants to get it done and is going to take could take a multi-billion-dollar loss on the project, is it wise to pay WEC in advance on that contract for work in which you think ultimately WEC is going to take a substantial loss?
My understanding that WEC was being paid a fixed amount to complete the project under this amendment, and that you could looking at timing issues, but you can't pay them more. I mean, there's always what I call a cash flow thing when you sign an amendment. When I sign contract, I usually get a bit more money up front, and then after that, it weighted into a cash flow curve. I can't get paid more.
So did you know that the owners had paid Westinghouse $1.3 billion in the first 15 months after the time period start of the fixed price amendment.
I don't know what the commercial terms were for payment. I think I remember reading that. I understand that they could only pay them. It's a timing issue. It's cash flow. You might get here, but you can't get paid more.
Let's close with this, Dr. Petitioner, because I think we are nearing the end of our day here. You said that the Bechtel schedule assessment was based on inaccurate information. Is that correct?
They had partial information to the schedule that was on the site. They had some quantity information, but not exactly what the status was by area. The amendment agreement changed the whole way the project was going to be run with Flora coming in. So if I were to do a schedule assessment, I would sit down and say, well, how is it really going to be done? Is it done the way of July 2015, or is it going to be done the way of October 2015? I would factor all that in. And I want to make a really important point here, because you put the schedule data up. I said to myself, well, take another data point, okay? This is one that these guys did. And remember, I said Bechtel hasn't had new build total. So I said, well, in October 2015, the project, Unit 1 total project, was about 50% complete. You had 46 months to the date that was signed in that contract. So I said, well, Ken, what did you do in the past? So, geez, in China, at First Concrete, I had 54 months to go, and I was about 11% complete. So I compared that with this. I said 46%, 54, 11 versus 50. I built the project starting at the 10% level. WEC, that you're at 50% on Unit 1. So I looked at this agreement that Ghana, I don't know all the details of this contract, but I said, it's doable, okay? If you make some of the changes and you get the feedback from China and you bring Flora in, you improve construction management, and you get the productivity improvement that I saw of using 75% labor on the second unit. And I talked to Kyle and said, Kyle, what about Unit 3? He said, they're issuing clean drawings. Productivity is better, it's costing less. And so one of the recommendations I made to WEC and the red team, I said, you're bidding India, clean up your drawings now. One, you want to finish your projects in the United States. Two, you got to take them to the new customer. I saw all this happening. So when I look at the numbers and the dates, I'm saying they make sense to me. And I think SCANA did a great job in negotiating a fixed price schedule date that were, from my perspective, as of 30, 40 years of experience, it looks sound.
Dr. Petitioner, I just want to quote from your report, page 17. You say, quote, most importantly, as Bechtel freely admitted, it did not have access to the level 3 schedule for the project, end quote. That's a belief of yours in forming your opinion.
They had access to all of it, and they couldn't. I read that they couldn't download it and use it. That's what I read.
And that's what you believe to be true, correct?
That's what I believe to be true.
My last question, Dr. Petitioner, have you ever heard of the owner of a multi-billion-dollar nuclear plant construction project relying solely on the opinion of a construction lawyer, a lawyer, to determine whether $1 million assessment by a global nuclear constructing firm was reliable?
I don't know of any case. I don't know if that's what happened.
Thank you for your time, Dr. Petitioner. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Cox. Does anybody else have one question?
Thanks.
Commissioners, thank you. Any redirect? Oh, you have a question?
Yes, I do.
Commissioner Howard.
You said in page 4 of your summary, as a general matter, the problems were identified in the Bechtel report were generally known to the nuclear construction industry to be problems faced by 2 U.S. AP 1000 projects. Members of the industry, including myself, are well aware of the nature of these problems, including scheduling problems. What were those problems that were well known to the industry?
the largest problem that was known was the constructability aspect of the modules, that the modules were built with too much engineering and not enough construction input into the module design. So when they got the site, they couldn't fit them in properly. That was found out in China. The other aspect that was known was that there was difficulties in the manufacturing of the modules because people that worked for me used to work for Shaw in China, and they were advising. So the Chinese users, the Chinese were telling me about these problems. So that was really number one. Number two, there was problems in the supply chain. The biggest impact was there was the equipment supply issues. The biggest one was Curtiss Wright, and that had a major impact on the schedule in China. The delays in the project were really well known because the Chinese were a couple of years behind. Okay, so that was well known in the industry. And then you asked the question, why are you late? And then you came back to, I'll call it first-of-a-kind design. I think you've heard that expression before. And so when you have first-of-a-kind design, nobody does it perfectly, okay? I can tell you on the project I built in Argentina, which we finished successfully, we had revision 15 and 16 on some of the drawings, okay? I mean, we finished, it was ugly, I was there. I was responsible for fixing it. These things get solved. I just think that WEC had a big challenge. They knew what the challenge was. The industry saw some of the mistakes. The Chinese worked through it and got out of it. Okay, they bullied through it. They fixed all these things. And so what I believe was that these units are running now in China, the AP1000 unit. They make more electricity than was contracted for. The Chinese were very unhappy a couple of years ago, I'll tell you that, really unhappy. But now they want more. So,
Thank you very much. You answered my question.
Sorry?
You answered my question. Thank you.
Okay, sorry I gave you too much, okay?
No, that's fine. Talk to the chairman about that.
That's your only question, Commissioner? I'm just checking.
I can think of right now.
Any other questions, Commissioners? Any redirect, Mr. Challey?
No, not of Dr. Petrunik, Mr. Chairman. I think it would be worthwhile before we break to discuss how we'll reconvene this panel in the morning, but I'll take your direction in that regard.
We will do that. So we're finished with. Yes, sir.
We're just going to confirm what you were just about to say.
I need an envelope, one of those Karnak things. Then. So we're going to excuse Dr. Petrunik. We're done with Dr. Petrunik. Dr. Petrunik, thank you, and you are excused. Okay, then, so what we're going to start, how do we need to start tomorrow to make sure we get everybody in?
So our suggestion, Mr. Chairman, would be for Mr. Cocombs and Mr. Young to begin the day in the morning. I'm sure there will be some cross-examination of them and perhaps some redirect. That will take some time. But we have two other witnesses that are set for date certain, Ms. Carlette Walker and Mr. Ken Brown, and an additional witness that should take very little amount of time. We expect, as the parties conducting cross-examination, primarily conducting cross-examination of Ms. Walker and Mr. Brown, that we would be able to complete that cross-examination tomorrow, so long as we have, so long as these gentlemen are off the stand sometime in the morning. And I believe that should be possible under the circumstances.
Mr. Chairman, we've all seen what is possible and should be done doesn't necessarily happen. Mr. Young was accommodated for last week, but I think they've said is available the rest of this week. ORS is bringing tomorrow two witnesses. These are, former SCE&G employees who are whistleblowers who've made themselves available with some struggle to be available tomorrow. And they're not being paid by anybody. And I think that we should try to respect their request and the Commission's grant of date certain for them and have them first thing in the morning to the extent possible. And that way, that gives us the greatest chance of completing their testimony tomorrow and then continuing on with these two gentlemen.
Okay. I think what we're going to try to do is give it a go and try to get these guys done and then move it along as fast as we can so we can get, because we want to have plenty of time for everyone. And that's the way we'll start. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Two other matters, housekeeping matters. One is I think Mr. Willoughby addressed this before, that all of the testimony exhibits filed in one of the dockets would also be in all of the consolidated docket and applying to all of those. And Mr. Butler is telling us I think we've communicated that.
Yes, sir.
The other housekeeping matter concerns an agreement of counsel addressing hearing exhibit 15, Gary Jones 2.47. This is the Bechtel Report Action Plan. ORS is renewing its motion that it be omitted because we understand the objection has been withdrawn.
Which number is that, Mr. Richardson?
In hearing exhibit 15, which I believe is the consolidated Gary Jones exhibits, GCJ, his initials, -2.47, is a one-page, I think, document.
It is.
Called Bechtel Report Action Plan. And we renew our move that it be admitted, just as the other Santee Cooper exhibits were, we believe, because the objection has been withdrawn.
That is correct, Mr. Chairman. We have withdrawn our objection to that particular exhibit.
Okay, then it will be admitted. We've got that. You got one? Okay, Mr. Butler.
Yeah, one thing, if I could see at least Mr. Challey and Mr. Richardson and perhaps Mr. Guile for a minute after we adjourn. It won't take long. I just have a brief procedural matter. Other counsel are welcome. You know, it's not rocket science, as they say, but counsel are welcome.
All our rocket
I do need to
scientists
see
are
you
gone.
on. That's true. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anything else we need? Yes, sir, Mr.
Chairman, this will be very brief, and
sir.
it sounds like we're going to wrap up on Wednesday, for which I think we are all very grateful. It is a massive record. To the extent the Commission is going to want closing statements, which I am not advocating for, but to the extent that you do, it would be helpful for us to know that now so we can start preparing.
I can't imagine anybody has much more to say.
Thank you. I just would like to know that.
I mean, I've heard. Let Mr. Butler address this, too.
Well, I'll just say, Mr. Chairman, my understanding through the grapevine is the will of a number of counsel is that no closing statement is really needed. What we have always said in the Commission in very long proceedings is it was just as preferable to include any remarks that you might have made in your closing statement in your proposed order, because that's the best of all possible places. We'll have it in writing and, may have the use of it in the order if we need it. So that's really a more efficient use of your time, in our general opinion.
Thank you, Mr. Butler. Mr. Chairman, that suits me just fine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It suits us as well. Given Your Honor's, the Chairman's preference on the order of witnesses tomorrow, is there any guidance or direction on time we can give the two other witnesses of a time certain, or do they need to be here at 9?
My recommendation is just have them here first thing in the morning and let's see how we go. I mean, we just don't know how long we've got for these witnesses.
I think we've got at least an hour.
An hour? Okay, well.
Okay. We will be encouraging everyone to move along as fast as possible in the morning so we can get to the end of this. Okay. Anything else that we need to talk about before we adjourn? Okay, we'll adjourn today and see you at 9 o'clock in the morning.